I have the pleasure of introducing our interviewer, Anna Musky-Goldwyn, who everyone's a multi-hyphenate when you bring them in. We're so lucky to have such incredible people. Anna's a writer, actor, activist, philanthropist, athlete. She is a former student athlete at UCLA. She was on the crew team. She is now, I mean, she does triathletes. She's unbelievable and has an incredible smile, just like her dad. She's now the head of membership for the NextGen board. So she's on our board of directors and contributes in so many ways, not to mention, she just wrote a story of service that was beautiful, not a dry eye in the house, for our mission event, our annual mission event, Real Stories, Real Lives. If you didn't get a chance to check that out, we'll put a link in the chat to check it out on our YouTube page. It was phenomenal, and Anna did an incredible job. So Anna is going to interview her father, actor, singer, producer. I'm sorry, Anna's the singer. Tony, you probably sing. I know you sing.
I'm definitely not a singer.
Okay, well that was me. That you have a bio out there somewhere, girl, that says you're a singer. So just go with it. I'm sure you can sing. Your family's too talented. Tony's a longtime supporter of ours and on our NextGen or on our board of governors. So this is a family legacy. So take it away, Anna. I'm so excited to hear you talk to Dad.
Dad, are you there?
I'm here.
Turn on your video.
Oh, my video's off. Someone turned it off. Okay.
Okay.
It's supposed to be coming on.
No, you're good. You're here.
I'm good. Okay.
I'm kind of like nervous to interview you. Is that weird?
This is a first.
Well, I guess I feel like we could talk ad nauseum about your career, but I thought that what's very specifically great about this specific interview is that, like our family has been involved with MPTF since its founding 100 years ago. And, I think contrary to what some people might find on the internet, I'm not your wife, I'm your daughter. Although your wife, my mother, is wonderful. And, you guys always have kind of been this example for me of being service driven. And I've always felt lucky to have parents who valued that and kind of instilled those values in me and Tess, my sister. And I guess my first question is really just like, since growing up watching the work that you and Mom did, which was always so wonderful, I started to think like, when did you in your young life, in your young career, when as a narcissistic actor did you decide to start caring about other people? And kind of when did you feel that call to service yourself?
Well, you reported accurately. Narcissistic actors tend not to think of that first. No, I mean, we had, like, as you mentioned, we had, it was kind of instilled in our family, and my grandpa and your great grandpa, it was very important to him. And, as you said, he was with MPTF from the very beginning in 1921. And it was incredibly important to my dad, your grandpa. And so it was, the call to service and to serve one's community was part of our family's kind of ethos. But I honestly didn't know how I could contribute. That was one of the harder things I had, because when you start out, you don't have enough money to really give, and you're trying to figure out what your way of contributing is. And it took me a while, to be honest, to find my way in. And I sort of would support in any way I could, any family endeavors, but I really couldn't make my own mark at all. And then when I started to find some success in my career and started to get a profile as an actor, I actually was really uncomfortable with that. The whole phenomenon of celebrity was really, I found awkward. I just wanted to be an actor and get to do what I love to do. And so when I started experiencing fame, it felt, other than my work, slightly fraudulent. So that was the thing that kind of really motivated me to see how I could use that platform to have an impact. And I learned that it really can, and I guess the other part of it was, and I think you and I talked about this when you were probably in college or younger, I just sort of splashed around a lot trying to figure out what worked for me and what felt authentic to me, and what I could do that, whether it's in a small way or in a bigger way, actually could have an impact. I remember, when you were, I guess, at UCLA, you asked me the same question, like, how do I find my way in? Because at that time you're like, I can't write a check. What can I do? And I think I'd said to you, just try a bunch of stuff and see what works. And that's very much what I did. I was older than you. I think that, frankly, your generation has a much more impressive impulse towards service than mine did, which was coming of age in the 1980s, which was fairly self-serving. Everyone just wanted to get ahead in their own career. And by the 90s and 2000s, I've really noticed the millennial generation really wants to give back. So I've always been really impressed by that. But so, so I really wanted to use my platform as a celebrity. As that increased, or sort of, it ebbs and flows, but as sort of generally the trajectory was upward, I really found I could make a difference, and got involved in different organizations. And MPTF was one of them. But there have been a number, and now I guess the thing for me as an actor that was most important was not to have it be performative, because there are lots of opportunities to do performative advocacy, where you get on Instagram, or you show up at an event and you get your picture taken, or you sort of speak out, but you're not really engaging on any kind of a deep level. And so that was also important to me, to find something that I really cared about, and that I was able to get knowledgeable about and have a lasting impact on.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is so interesting, because I think one thing that, like, I witnessed from the outside was, as your career went on and as I became an adult and Scandal started, which was like the beginning of social media, basically, in that incarnation of it, talking about being sort of a celebrity at the intersection of your career, but also trying to do this advocacy work that you'd already been contributing to. I'm wondering what that was like, how has the idea of social media impacted the way that you, as, a very famous person, how has that impacted the way that you can communicate with your audience at large, and sort of the way you can message? And are there any sort of drawbacks to that kind of like widespread messaging platform that you now have, and how is it different than it was before?
Well, it's been incredible. I mean, I didn't really, I was completely not interested in social media until Scandal. I knew it was something, you were into, and Tess, like I think when you were in high school, when Facebook even became a thing, which is amazing that it's transformed our world, and it's not that old, and I was kind of allergic to it, being, in my 40s when it came around, and the whole idea of communicating in 140 characters on Twitter just seemed so offensive to me. Like, that's the problem with our society, that this sort of soundbite culture. And yet, when we did Scandal, and Kerry Washington and Shonda Rhimes had this idea of getting on to Twitter to sort of live tweet our shows, and it kind of became this, they taught us how to do it, and I said, okay, we'll try it. And I realized immediately the impact. I mean, just from, I'll never forget this, I figured out how to use it, and I was terrified to put out my first tweet, thinking, who the hell cares what I have to say? And then I did it, and I had 10 followers, and then an hour later I had 100 followers, and the next day I had 1,000 followers, and then a week later, 10,000 followers. And I was like, this is like standing in a sports arena with all of these people listening to what I have to say. So maybe I can actually say some useful things, and it will have an impact. And so it was really clear to me the power of that platform, particularly for charities, for advocacy. And I would have someone from whether it was MPTF or, as you know, I'm also on the board of the Innocence Project and a number of other things. And someone calls me and says, "Hey, Tony, a Scandal fan just donated $150,000 to us."
Wow.
What?
That's,
That
I
kind of
never
thing
knew
happened.
that. That's
What's
so
that?
cool. That's so cool. I didn't
Yeah,
know.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
That has real impact. So then, so I quickly developed real respect for social media, and it's an incredible tool. And of course, it has a downside. It can be very shallow. It can be destructive. It can be, misinterpreted. Things you say can be held against you for years if you're not cautious and careful about how you use it. But so it's like any big communications tool. And the other thing that I find really irritating about it, which I mentioned before, is that it can be very, merely performative. So you have lots of people doing very shallow things on it, which maybe can have an impact as well. But that was just something I wanted to be careful of. So, yeah, it's changed. It sounds stupid to say now, but it has really changed the world of philanthropy.
Yeah. I guess I wonder, like, something that I think we've all kind of noticed in the last, I don't know, however much time, that, I think sometimes as just normal people, we can feel a little bit disempowered and sort of feel like we don't have the influence that we wish we did, or we don't have the platform to kind of get across the message. And, everyone here watching is already either a supporter of MPTF, or they're becoming a supporter, or they want to learn more, or whatever their reason is. They're here at an event for a nonprofit. And I'm kind of wondering if you have advice for people, specifically young people who, might not have hundreds of thousands of people at their fingertips, but I personally believe that obviously we all can have an impact, and we all can kind of send a message. And as someone who's sort of, been not only charitable, but been very good at communicating that sort of advocacy work, what would you say to people who are sort of starting that journey and trying to get into it?
Yeah, that's such a great question. It's so important. You don't need, in the same way that you don't need a big fat checkbook, you don't need a big following to have an impact. And it's, to my mind, it's about kind of like two things. It's about community building, and it's about storytelling. And I remember when you and I first started talking about this seriously. I guess you were maybe at UCLA, at USC Film School. You're a writer and a television writer, and when you thought, well, what can I do? And you found a charity that you thought was kind of interesting, and you went in and you're like, well, am I going to lick envelopes? What am I going to do? You said, well, I'm a writer, and you ended up writing for them and doing their newsletter or something like that. And then you did the cancer charity. A friend of yours, mom, was a struggling with breast cancer, and it started a charity, and you started working for her and writing these amazing materials for them using the skill that you had, and you ended up having a real impact. And I think that people, just by taking one step to engaging and seeing what skills you can bring, look, at the end of the day, I'm an actor and a director and stuff, and I like to tell stories. That's what I do. And I find that much more than any check that I write or any event that I attend, the thing that I'm best at with the charities that I'm involved in is helping them tell their story. So, the way that I became involved with the Innocence Project was a criminal justice, organization. I made a film about one of their cases and got drawn into that organization because the work that they were doing was so important. And my role as a storyteller, which so many people probably on the NextGen board, that's their, a lot of people listening are storytellers as well. That's a tremendous value for it. So, but I think in general, just engaging in whatever way, it doesn't matter, is connecting to a community and sharing passion and getting turned on by work that moves you, and you'll find your way of how you can contribute, and you build a network of people who care in the same way you do, and that has an exponential power. So, I spent a lot of years when I was your age waiting to sort of figure out how I could have a big impact, and I didn't understand that just baby steps very quickly turn into big leaps, you know, if you do it with other people. And so, and you don't have to get it right perfectly at first, you know, you just experiment. And I find that connection with other people and engaging in a conversation and, like I said, community building is really the whole deal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's harder to community build these days, but at least we're trying.
Yeah, but look what we're doing. This
like,
is exactly
yeah,
what this is. I see,
yeah.
I think 50 people watching this. There were 53 before, so obviously we've turned some people off. But
You're very boring.
they're like, oh, this is too. No, but that's what it is. Look at Zoom.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's all great. And I think it's like, even obviously the two of us have talked like ad nauseum about this, but I think it's like always cool to just reiterate, you know, that like, this isn't a world that we can just kind of like sit by and watch. And I think that, you know, people like you and public figures, who are setting really good examples are very important. So I appreciate that on a personal level. But to kind of just talk a little bit now about your career, we had a few questions that I think are interesting. One of them is, as either an actor or director, who is someone that you've worked with, an actor you've worked with that you have really admired, and why? If you can think of an example.
So many. The list is
It's a hard question, but you have
long, but I guess, you know, in the sort of space that we're talking about, people that really use their platform, you know, to talk about all the talented people whose work I respect is too long. But people who I admire tremendously, who have really, who are tremendously gifted and who use their gifts and their platforms so effectively, the people that come foremost to mind would be, number one, Kerry Washington. You know, Kerry has really takes her work, advocacy work, so seriously, and is so committed and really does it in such a professional, efficient, incredibly impactful way. Bryan Cranston as well. You know, Bryan is someone who is just has such a giant heart and is always thinking how he can leverage whatever, you know, project he's a part of to help people. And I'm, you know, whether it's MPTF or another charity or a political cause, or frankly, the people he's working with who could use help or something, he's just extraordinary that way. Tom Hanks, of course, is someone else who, you know, has used his platform to do so much for people. Yeah, I mean, there are many others, but it really is the singular feature are people who have a kind of humility and respect for the how fortunate we are not only to do what we get to do, but to be granted, you know, a platform where people, you know, shine a light on us when we talk. And if you're intelligent and responsible enough and humble enough to be informed about what you're talking about and to have respect for the platform, you really can do tremendous things. But again, you don't have to be famous to do that.
Yeah.
And you know, look, those guys are a lot more famous than me, and all of our fame ebbs and flows. You know, when you're, you know, I honestly, you know, when you're in a hit, you have tremendous leverage, and so we want to take advantage of that when that happens. And you know, Scandal's over now, and I really do look forward. I honestly think about, oh, the next time I'm in something that blows up, how can I use that platform to have as much impact as I can? Because frankly, there are moments in one's career, you know, yeah, if you're Tom Hanks, you know, there are those rare people who just keep hitting home runs, you know, and they're extraordinary. But for a lot of us who are fortunate to have, you know, more than one peak in a career, you know, you can, when you have those peaks, they don't last forever. So it's really important, in addition to taking advantage of them business-wise, you can really have a tremendous impact, you know, in terms of advocacy. And so everybody out there, whether you're an executive or a television writer or, you know, whatever your, you know, career path is, if there's a moment when you're, you know, on fire, you should capitalize on that, not just for yourself, but it really is an opportunity. If you're a studio executive and you have a hit, well, there's a lot of people who want to talk, to return your phone calls in that period of time. And so you can really make hay out of that.
Yeah.
For places like MPTF.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I mean,
Or
one
when
thing
you're a
that,
showrunner doing your own show, you know, and a lot of people want to be in
yeah,
business with you, you have tremendous impact, and it doesn't last forever. You know, it does this and then goes quiet for a bit and then it happens again. So anyway.
yeah, I mean, we have a couple more questions. Of one sort of personal thing that made me think of is some of the best advice you've always given me is just to keep doing the work and to not worry about the ebbs and flows. And I think that, like, that's always the cherry on top. Like, if you do the work, not only do you kind of get the self gain from it, but that you know, you get to then sort of have a platform for whatever period of time. And that's always been very helpful advice for me when I've kind of been feeling like I've lost momentum or something like that.
Yeah, and look, we all lose momentum. That's part of the game. And that's, and there's, you know, I found this is both career wise, but it's, I found the more like in terms of your engagement as an advocate, that never needs to change. It's like, it's not like you only advocate when all the lights are shining on you, or when you have your bank account is at its fattest and you're like, oh, this year I can write big checks. It's like, that's a very ineffective, inefficient, and shallow way of looking at it. And it really anxiety provoking, frankly. It's not gonna make you happy.
Yeah.
But if you are truly committed to the work and you're like, this month, this year, here's what I can do. And I'm passionate about the work, so put me in, coach. How can I help? And then all of a sudden, if Anna Musky-Goldwyn is running a hit show and you're, you know, your attitude toward the work isn't going to change at all. You're going to do what you're always doing, but then you're going to have just much more facility for that period of time to have a you know, that much more bigger impact, but you're not going to change. It's the same way as if you're, you know, whatever passion yours for your own artistry, whatever your work is, you know, if you're a studio executive and you're into fostering writers and developing projects that you care about, you know, if that's what you care about and that's the day-to-day work you do, whether you're hot or less hot, or whether something's a hit or not, it's the same. And I really feel the same about advocacy and philanthropy.
Yeah. With just two more quick questions. The first one coming from one of our board members. He was asking that you, as especially a young actor, never had any worry about taking roles playing gay men. And I mean, even obviously to this day, and especially when you were young, what was it that made you feel that it was so important to take those roles instead of thinking, you know, this could hurt your career? And I think that's also something just like, you know, making me think that is like such a challenge as an actor, you know, whether it's you taking a role as a gay man or it's, you know, other people kind of like stepping outside their own experience to showcase something else. As an actor, how do you sort of get that courage to do that and also sort of feel that responsibility?
Well, look, when I started out in the 80s, it was an issue, you know, like it never made any sense to me. I remember the first time I did really one of my very first jobs in LA was an episode of a show called Designing Women, where I played a guy who had AIDS. And Linda Bloodworth Thomason, who created that show, her mother had died of AIDS that year. And she did an episode. It was the first time a story about AIDS was on primetime television. And I felt lucky. I felt privileged to be able to tell that story. And a couple of years later, and this was the height of the epidemic, I did a play in New York called The Sum of Us, where I played a gay character. It was a relationship between a father and son. And it was the same year that Ghost came out. So it was my first big break, and it was blowing up in the theaters. And it was actually the same summer that Ghost was in the theaters. And people were saying to me, you know, you're playing a gay character, you know, this could impact your career. And I honestly, it just pissed me off. I thought, okay, well, if I'm gonna shy away because I'm afraid of something, like how dare I call myself an artist? So it made me feel kind of militant. Aside from the fact that I had so many friends who were impacted by this devastating illness. And it wasn't that I felt courageous at all. I thought would feel like a complete coward and a fraud if I didn't do that. And of course, you know, after Tom Hanks did Philadelphia, they kind of all changed, you know. And now some of the issue is appropriation, you know,
Right.
where you're going, well, wait, why is a straight actor playing a gay role that could be given to a gay actor? I mean, it's less of an issue, or a straight actor playing a trans character, which is a whole different set of issues that are
Well,
important.
that's like progress, right?
That is progress, you know.
Yeah.
That's something that's an important issue to be considered. But
Yeah.
it was very different. And I honestly, I had people calling me saying, what are you doing? And
Yeah.
you know, look, bigotry still exists, and we just have to resist it.
Yeah, no, totally. One more question, very specifically, interested in what it was like working with Alan Pakula on the Pelican Brief.
Oh,
Which I remember, like, I never knew what the Pelican Brief was when I was a kid, but there was always like some framed thing somewhere in our house of the movie, and I never knew what it was.
yeah, there's a picture of Mom with Alan, because she also worked with
Yeah.
Alan. Well, Jane, Anna's mom, is a great production designer. Alan was one of the absolute greats, so I felt he was just a beautiful man, and I felt really lucky to work with him. He was one of the great masters, and gosh, what do I remember? I remember well, kind of the way that I got that part. As I mentioned, my wife Jane was doing a project with Alan that ended up at that time not happening. It was a movie with Tom Hanks and Deborah Winger that ended up becoming the film that was A Man Loves a Woman that Andy Garcia did with Luis Mandoki, a different director. But Alan was making that movie at the time, and he came to see me in the play that I referenced, The Sum of Us, this one in New York where I was playing the gay character. And he came to see me in the play, and I hadn't met him. And he left this beautiful message on my answering machine saying how much he liked it. And then he wanted to meet me because he was doing this movie, The Pelican Brief. And that's how we, you know, how I got that part. But yeah, I can't begin to describe when you work with masters like Alan or the other people that I've met. The thing that I most felt about him was just his kindness. You know, his movies speak for themselves.
Yeah. Well, I will say, I think that Mom has been responsible for getting you more than one job.
That is true. Basically, if it wasn't for Mom, I probably would certainly not be an actor anymore. I don't know where. I don't know. I'd probably be homeless. I don't know.
I don't know about that, but well, that's the time we have. I appreciate the conversation. I feel like this is a conversation we have in private that is fun to now have in public. And you know, just to kind of reiterate, I think that the legacy, I always feel very proud to sort of have not only the legacy like career-wise, but sort of our family advocacy-wise, and specifically as it relates to MPTF. And I hope that you know, that legacy can inspire other people to understand that, like, you know, service has a very lasting impact, even long after you're gone. So
True statement. I feel the same way.
So with that, we'll hand it over to Louis to conclude everything. But thank you, Dad.
Thanks, baby.
See you soon.
Bye.
Well, maybe not so soon.
I'll call you later.